Today we're going to work on a signature shadow work spread that comes from the book for the Shadow and Light Values and Archetypes deck, and a variation of that spread in a new book with a new deck that's set to publish in early 2026. I always introduce anything that has to do with shadow work first by saying that we are taking a very light approach to this. I believe that real shadow work should be done in a clinical setting with a qualified professional, and that's not me. I do know quite a bit about it because I have done that kind of work with a qualified therapist, but that's not what we're doing here. We're applying card reading as a form of self-study. And there are aspects of shadow work that can be applied for that purpose safely if you're really clear about what you're doing. And both of the decks that we're using today are based on the prescriptive nature of card reading. So we're not trying to predict the future, and we're definitely not trying to dig down into any deep, dark places. We're just using the cards as an exploratory tool. And we're going to run through this live recording of the reading fairly quickly, and then we'll go back and break it down to go deeper with the tutorial. The Bright Side of the Shadow is quite simply a deck for randomizing pre-written journaling prompts that relate to looking for all the good stuff that might be hidden in the shadow. Because very often that's exactly how you find your way into the light and the brighter side of life, and that's what this spread is for. We used the Shadow and Light deck in our last astrological houses reading, and even though this is in no way an astrological reading, I do like to make correlations between the kind of inner work that we're doing and the signs and the phases of the moon. And the super full moon in Taurus on Wednesday night signaled the beginning of a phase for emotional release with a strong focus on stability and security. And that energy combined with that really powerful full moon can stir some feelings of instability or just feeling unsettled. So since this earth sign, Taurus, has a lot to do with grounding, this is a good time for a shadow work spread to help with clearing out and settling some of that old energy that needs to be released. And I always start with a pre-shuffled deck and then shuffle a little bit more until I feel like I'm ready to lay out the cards. So we start at the center of the spread with the central theme for the reading and what we're calling the inner child position. Directly below it, we've got the shadow self to the left, the past self, at the top, the higher self, and to the right, the future self. And the primary question coming from the inner child is, what would make me feel stronger? This question comes from the part of the inner child that wants to connect with the energy of the warrior, to feel strong and capable and responsible. And there's always a little bit of advice right there on the card, and this time it's to feel for the right energy. So before we uncover any other question cards, we're going to look for the energy of the answer, clarifying with the Redeemer card and the energy of awakening. And the Redeemer is always leading you into the light. That really is the purpose of this card. And this is the first time that I've drawn this card clarifying for the Bright Side deck. And I literally just now noticed for the first time that the Redeemer card is mirroring the little girl and the little boy in the shadow. Anyway, now we've got a card with the energy of the question and another card with the energy of the answer. And with the principle of integrity at play in the background, and because this first card is a meditation card, and because it actually says right on the card to feel for the right energy, you can use these two cards to meditate on matching the energy of the real you and studying the energy of the Redeemer for leveling up. And that's where you're going to start looking to find your strength. The second card for the shadow self sits just below the card for the inner child. And the second question, how can I adjust my attitude, still comes from the child, now exploring the energy of the archer. And in this position, we're looking for information that might be obscured by an unconscious aspect that lies in the shadow. We're clarifying with the ruler card, and Since the underlying card is a reflection card, we can assume that the word control down here at the bottom is referring to controlling your thinking and your thoughts, in particular right now as we start moving into the past position. And this question is still being asked from the perspective of the inner child. And the same goes for this third card. But now we're looking into the past to see if there's any information there that we can gain from studying the energy of the explorer. And this is an expression card. If you can see up there at the top, there's somebody actually doing something. So that means that it has something to do with something that you need to do. And the question is, where have I been feeling frozen or stuck? And now we've got the archer again. So we've got a very similar energy here to the correlations that we just made in the shadow position. Is there something that you've been afraid to do or something that's been keeping you stuck in the past? And you're the only one who knows what that is, but there is some action to take here that will get you moving in the right direction. At the top, the child is asking for advice from the higher self, and it points to the energy of the peacemaker with the question, what can I offer, accept, or free? And the advice is to seek the solutions that heal. So we're looking for a clarifying card that points to how to do that healing. And that's actually exactly what we've got with the caregiver. That automatically makes me feel like offering kindness to yourself and the people around you is going to be the key to making the peace that you're looking for and the answer for how to heal. So maybe consider who you might be able to help and how that would lead to a new attitude and the action that needs to be taken to resolve something from the past, with kindness as the focus for controlling and directing your thought life to adjust your attitude and the direction moving forward. The fifth card is in the future position with the archetype of the judge and the principle of discipline, asking the question, what needs to be done now? The advice is to seek the right balance. And again, this is a reflection card. So there's still some thinking to do about what needs to be done. And for the clarifying card, we've got the shadow. And highlighting the shadow's role in making the unconscious conscious and the real inner work of self-discovery. And if that's what needs to be done now, we've got two last cards to add to the spread to answer the question, how? First, we've got the Reaper, which I do not consider a negative card in any way. It's just a card that says to get ready for change and to look for change as a part of the transformation process. Then we've got the Jester, which is actually looking back at the ruler, and I think that's really interesting. But both the Jester and the Reaper are still tied to the question, what needs to be done now? And I think maybe the Jester is looking to the ruler for some direction on how to keep things light in your thought life. The shadow card can feel a little heavy in a future position. It says that there's still work to be done in the realm of self-discovery, but we're not trying to get stuck in a dark place with this kind of work. And with the shadow in this position and the Redeemer as a central card for the reading, this makes a lot of sense. This is the work right now. We're just trying to do it with the right attitude and clear judgment about what actually needs to be done to resolve whatever's coming up from the past. We're always looking to dig down into the shadow for information that we can use to move into the light. And since this is a tutorial, we're going to break everything down to get a better understanding of how to read the cards and how to recreate the spread on your own with or without these two decks. And we'll start by taking a look at a couple graphics from the text to get a better understanding of the inner work and how to apply the cards from this reading as a form of self-study. This is the diagram that we use in both books for the decks as a representation of Carl Jung's map of the psyche, and we're using it here to get a better understanding of shadow work with the self at the center of the personal unconscious, the ego and the persona working in the conscious mind in relationship to the outer world, and the shadow and animus at work with the self in the collective unconscious. Both the ego and the shadow relate very specifically to what's happening in the personal unconscious, and the ultimate goal of all shadow work is integration, doing the work to make the unconscious conscious. You don't have to remember all of this. The only reason I've got it up here on the screen is to help you recognize the difference when we get to the spread on the next page. We're not trying to recreate this model, but it is good to know that the inner child is generally considered to be in the realm of the shadows, so it resides just below conscious thought. The spread we're using today is a variation of the Inner Child's Counsel, and in its simplest form, there are only 5 cards drawn. And no matter which version we're using, these 5 cards are in stationary positions exactly as we laid out those first 5 cards at the beginning of our reading, with the child asking the primary question for the reading at the center of the spread, the shadow self just below it to represent anything that might be hidden or needs to be explored more deeply, with memories that relate to past experience to the left, looking for information that's coming from the past self, messages from the higher self at the top, and connections that you're making with future versions of yourself to the right. No matter what kind of deck you're using, all 5 cards are offering energy and information to help you draw on your intuition and come up with your own answers. But we can expand on this version of the spread with these 4 wild cards that are primarily there to help you ask more questions and to work as a clarifier for the reading. So if you're asking what, the question is generally related to a better understanding of the subject matter. Questions that ask who are generally related to an archetype that can help you access the part of you that holds the answer, and in some cases to another person that's involved with that situation. If it's a where question, it's usually in relationship to the time frame, telling you where to look for the answer and focusing your study in the present, the past, or the future. And the spread that we're using today is a little more complex in that we're really focused on how to do the work and using 2 decks with the first layer representing those first 5 cards to ask for additional questions. And in this case, asking those questions with the bright side deck. And that really is its purpose. It was made to randomize journaling prompts for self-study. The second layer here for us today is representing the energy of the archetypes to help you identify the energy of the answer. At the end, we added 2 more cards for moving forward as prompts for how you get to where you want to go. And we can break this down a little bit more with a quick guide for each position that paints a more detailed picture of the line of questioning. No matter what kind of deck you're using, the inner child still sits at the center of the reading as the querent, right? That's the part of you that's asking in this reading. And the first card setting the central theme, the primary question, and the basic information that relates to the answer. The second card digs down into the shadow for hidden information with an archetype that leads to uncovering the underlying theme. The third card looks into the past with a question for exploring unresolved topics or reminders of lessons already learned. The fourth card looks to the higher self with a clarifying question and an archetype that highlights a bigger picture theme. And the fifth card looks to the future with a question about what to do moving forward and a distilled message from the archetype that is going to lead the way. The last 2 cards are what I consider kind of transitional cards, addressing how to move forward by creating correlations and tying the entire reading together. So now we're going to zoom in on these 2 cards that are central to the reading and the question, what would make me feel stronger? If you were recreating the spread and you didn't have a deck like this to ask the questions for you, you would, through journaling and choosing a topic and then choosing a question that you keep in your mind as you lay out a card from any deck you choose, using your intuition and the imagery on the card to help you make your correlations, and then drawing a card clarifying the energy of the answer. And obviously, we're randomizing the practice by using questions that are already written on the cards. But either way, we're starting a conversation here. And in this case, the response comes from the Redeemer archetype with an answer that leads to awakening and leveling up and feeling for the energy of the real you. This next question comes from the part of the child that's seeking direction for how to get stronger with the archer. And another question, how can I adjust my attitude? The advice is to seek more enthusiasm, and the clarifying card is the ruler, suggesting that you actually can take control of your thought life, purposefully seeking more enthusiasm by changing the way you think. And this card is still looking for information that applies to that primary question. So this is the next step for leveling up and feeling stronger. These two cards are sitting in the past position, with the past self and the explorer asking, where have I been frozen or stuck? And the advice to bravely explore. Clarified by the archer, this is the card that says pick your direction and then make your move. And because of its position in the spread, and because we're still looking to answer that central question, now also looking to further answer a question about adjusting your attitude, these two cards are saying there is something to do that relates to resolving something from the past. Is there anything that you've been ignoring or putting off that really does need to be done? In the fourth position, we've got the overarching theme coming from the higher self with the peacemaker. And this is another reflection card, so it's primarily focused on thinking. And the question is, what can I offer, accept, or free? With the advice to seek the solutions that heal. And I love the caregiver offering the answer for this. Offer kindness, accept kindness, give it freely, accept it freely, be kind to yourself. And it still applies to that central question, how to feel stronger. And I think it's good to know that even in the future position, there may still be some important information coming up from the past that relates to clear thinking, especially when it comes to ideas for whatever needs to be done. Living in the present moment, making plans for the future, and honoring past versions of yourself does require some balance. And exploring any lessons from the past without getting caught up or lost or stuck in the energy of past experience, without ignoring or burying it, with the shadow as the clarifying card, I feel really drawn to the staircase and how it relates to the central theme. For me, it's an obvious reminder to keep doing the work that leads to awakening. It's a really clear visual for leveling up. Maybe the balance that you're seeking has something to do with studying past versions of yourself without being stuck or frozen there. With these last two cards directly related to that same question about what needs to be done, and tied to the two cards that we were just studying, what needs to be done now, and still relating to the central question about how to feel stronger, the Reaper is a card of change and transformation coming from the higher self as advice for how to move forward. Change is part of life. I think the Jester is coming from the shadow, reminding you to keep things light. This transformation is coming with a sense of lightness, making plans for what needs to be done, addressing unresolved topics from the past without beating up on yourself or anyone else. And if we zoom out to look at the spread as a whole and go all the way over to the left, the do something card is in the past position with an arrow pointing straight toward the future. You're going to face it with kindness for yourself, keeping the overall energy of thought light to access information from the past without getting lost in it. That's the how. Coupled with the advice from the higher self, accepting change as a part of life, as a part of the transformation process. Self-discovery is the goal and the distilled message wrapped up in every part of this reading. We've got one meditation card in the present position, coming from the inner child with the primary question. We've got one expression with something to do that relates to the past. We've got 3 reflection cards, one in the shadow, one in the light, and one in the future position. So with 3 reflection cards, there's a lot of thinking to do. And very often that's when I recommend that you do some writing. So there you go. You've got 5 questions to ask and a practical method for studying different parts of yourself and a whole lot of information to uncover and work with over the next couple weeks with the waning energy of the moon. And that's going to set you up for the new moon in Scorpio on November 20th. And that phase is all about studying your feelings and using those feelings to set clear intentions for the next phase. This phase is primarily about releasing old, stuck, or frozen energy so that you can move into that next phase with a clean slate, feeling stronger by the time we start setting those intentions for the next new moon.